Book 2, Chapter 1, The Gorgon's Stare. This time, there was no choice. Before Phoenix, flashing against the azure sky, was a menu. Only one option was highlighted. Level 9, The Gorgon's Stare. No sooner had he selected it than he was lying face down, clutching at damp, heavy ground. I'm back. Back in the game. He scrambled to his feet and took in his surroundings. He was standing on a beach with the sea wind booming in his ears. He started looking around for Laura. He didn't have to search for long. "Oh, Phoenix!" She took a few steps towards him, then stopped abruptly. "Tell me I'm not going mad. We are by the sea, aren't we?" "That's right." But how? I don't understand." "It's the game, Laura. It's all part of the game." Then he remembered his warning. "I thought I told you not to play." She didn't reply. She was reaching down, plunging her hands into the waves of the incoming tide. "But this is no game. It's real water, real sand." "Or parallel water and parallel sand," said Phoenix. Laura fixed him with a withering glare. "I don't know what you're talking about, Phoenix," she said. "All I know is that we're on a beach somewhere." "And I know where," thought Phoenix. "Phoenix," said Laura, "I'm scared. This isn't fun anymore. Just get me home." "That's the whole point," said Phoenix. "I don't know how. Can't you just press a button or something?" "I only wish I could." Laura was losing her temper. "You got me into this, Phoenix. Now get me out." Just calm down, Laura." "Calm down? I'm lost in some crazy computer game, and you tell me to calm down?" A trill on the 7-reed Arcadian pipes brought the argument to an end. Phoenix heard a familiar voice. It was the guide, Pan. He must have been watching them from his vantage point, perched on a rock overlooking the beach. "You! Now, is that any way to talk to your guide through this troubled land?" Laura was staring at his cloven hooves and the wiry hair that covered his legs. "What's the matter with you, girl?" he demanded. "Never seen a satyr before?" She shook her head slowly, her eyes widening. Are you for real? Is anything, my dear, is anything?" Phoenix decided to try a more useful question. "Is this Seriphos?" "Of course it is. It is the destination you chose." "Seriphos, home of Perseus. I see your faculties haven't deserted you entirely. What did you expect after all the times you fled from the Minotaur with your tail between your legs? You have been demoted." He inspected Phoenix. "Oh, I do apologize. You don't have a tail, do you?" All right, Phoenix snapped. He was feeling sensitive about his failures in the labyrinth. "Cut the jokes. So I'm playing the part of Perseus. That's lower than Theseus?" Pan nodded casually. "That's what demoted means." From somewhere he produced a pocket dictionary. "Yes, demoted. Put down. Now, just look at this. Put down also means killed. Quite apt, really. So, what happens now?" "You fight your way back up. I'm afraid you scored less than impressively on level 10 of Shadow of the Minotaur. You had more than enough chances, but you barely tested the beast. It is the top level, of course, and you did keep coming back for more, but you failed. So level 9 it is." What's level 9? asked Laura. Pan frisked gaily. "Let me show you a trick. Go on, I'm dying to do it." Laura shook her head. "No, I want to know what's in level 9. "That's just it," said Pan. "That's the trick." "Oh, just let him do the stupid trick," said Phoenix. "Thank you," chuckled Pan. "I know you won't be disappointed." With that, he began to sniff and snort. "What's he doing?" asked Laura. She got her answer instantly, and in the most dramatic fashion, as Pan drew a twisting serpent from each nostril. "Ugh, that's disgusting." Pan clapped his hands at Laura's expression of disgust. "But the best is yet to come," he announced. Immediately his hair started sprouting dozens of snakes. "Going to tell her, Legendeer?" Phoenix nodded grimly. "Not got it yet, Laura. It's Medusa." The serpents retreated into Pan's scalp as quickly as they'd appeared. Exactly. The Gorgon's stare. If you want to try your hand once more in the lair of the beast, you must first conquer the Gorgon Medusa. So, to get back to the palace of King Midas, I have to complete this level. That's about the size of it. What about Dad? Phoenix demanded. You mentioned my dad. Reach the heart of the labyrinth, and your questions will be answered. So he is here. Complete the game, Phoenix Graves. There is no other way forward. Laura turned to Phoenix. Is he trying to tell us we can't stop it? Phoenix gave her a sad smile before turning to Pan. Let's get this straight, said Phoenix. I'm here because I failed as Theseus. Oh yes, you got that right, chuckled Pan. The labyrinth's far too hard for a beginner. Whoever let you try was either wicked or stupid. The thought flashed through Phoenix's mind. Glenn Reed or Dad. But whatever he thought of Reed, it wasn't fair on Dad. He wasn't stupid. It's simply that he was out of his depth, like any normal person would be. No, Pan continued. It's the Gorgon's head for you, my lad, and even that's a tall order. You need a bit of practice before you're ready to slay demons. As Pan pumped invisible iron, Phoenix remembered his miserable defeat at the hands of Adams. Call it a workout, said Pan, completing his exaggerated bicep curls. Sure you're up to it? I'm not sure of anything, said Phoenix. Pan threw back his shaggy head and roared with laughter. And you're the hero? Can so much really rest on such frail shoulders? Phoenix frowned. Look, he said, setting his curiosity aside. You may be a god, but there's no need to rub it in my face. Just give me a clue. Where do we start? First, said Pan, those clothes, so otherworld, so earthly. He snapped his fingers, and Phoenix and Laura's jeans and tops were replaced by white tunics. Togas? Asked Laura. That's Roman, Phoenix told her. Chittens. You should fit in better now, said Pan, inspecting his handiwork. I doubt it, replied Phoenix. Meaning? You may not have noticed, but there's a little matter of Laura being black. Won't she stand out a bit in ancient Greece? She could be Persian, said Pan offhandedly. The Hellenese don't care about skin colour. She still won't pass for Persian, Phoenix countered. It's a vast empire, said Pan. Say she's from foreign parts. That usually works. He turned it over in his mind. Yes, it ought to get you by. Get us by? Cried Laura. I don't want to get by. I don't even want to be here. I want to go home. Home? Said Pan from his perch. That could be difficult. It may take some time. He picked himself up and turned to go. What do you think you're doing? Laura demanded, beside herself. You just can't clear off. Pan winked. Oh, can't I? Then he was gone. What are we supposed to make of all of that? Asked Laura. I mean, is he real? Beats me. Just a minute, said Laura. Someone's coming. Phoenix squinted against the strong sunlight. There are two of them, he said. How will we explain who we are? She asked. Phoenix wanted to say he was the hero, but he wasn't sure whether he believed himself. Phoenix shielded his eyes against the strong sunlight and watched the approach of two men through the heat haze. 2 spear points, 2 sword blades. At the sight of their weapons and the face pieces that gave an inhuman look to their helmeted heads, he felt his insides begin to dissolve. We'd better hide, he said, Then from somewhere he found the courage to stand his ground. No, maybe not. That's right. I don't need to come up with a story. I'm Perseus. I am the story. Perseus! They shouted. You're wanted at court. Court? Whispered Laura. This island of Seriphos is an unhappy land, Phoenix explained. It is ruled with great cruelty by a tyrant king. His name is Polydectes. Tyrant? Laura repeated, raising her eyes skyward. I might have guessed. Just try to keep mum, he advised as the heavily armored men approached. Let me do the talking. The game was there to be won, but they couldn't afford any mistakes. Oh, don't worry, said Laura. I don't want anything to do with this madness. It's all yours, thank you very much. The soldiers arrived, sweating under their armor and helmets. I have to find the words. King Polydectes isn't happy about you disappearing like this. He demands your presence, now. Laura gave Phoenix a sideways glance. She was obviously impressed that he'd got the king's name right. He was tempted to tell her that he knew the story into which they had been plunged, but precious little else. Somehow, he didn't have the heart. Who's this? Asked one of the spearmen. She's... Phoenix remembered Pan's advice. A servant, he explained, struggling to overcome the shake in his voice. Bought her from foreign parts. He quite enjoyed the look of suppressed fury on Laura's face as he delivered the line, servant. The main thing was, it satisfied the two soldiers. Well, let's be having you, young Perseus. They fell in line behind the two soldiers. Phoenix was wondering about a strange tattoo on both men's necks when one asked him a question. Been up to any mischief lately? He asked. There are questions which disarm you, and neither Phoenix's books nor his newly found intuition gave him a defense against this one. Mischief? What sort of mischief? The second soldier laughed out loud. His helmet tilted back, revealing the tattoo. An owl. What sort of mischief, he says. Drinking, brawling, carousing, your usual style, mulatto. What sort of mischief indeed? The sort that could see you locked up in the palace cells forever and a day. I tell you, you've done it this time, you young scamp. Laura gave Phoenix an inquiring look, but he was stumped. He dug deep to discover what he was supposed to have done, what Perseus had done, but he came up empty-handed. It was the first soldier's turn to make conversation. I don't think that mother of yours is doing herself any favours either. I can't think of another woman on this island who would turn down King Polydectes' hand in marriage. She's brave, or very foolish, his companion interrupted. Your mother? hissed Laura. What are they talking about? Not my mother, Phoenix whispered back. The mother in the game, Perseus's mother. I'm just playing a part, remember? Never lose sight of one fact. This is all part of the game. Laura frowned. Phoenix squeezed her upper arm in a gesture of reassurance. Just trust me. The court of King Polydectes was less a palace than a fortress. Its forbidding battlements were guarded by sentinels carrying tall spears and massive, elaborately wrought shields. Scarlet banners fluttered from the ramparts. Ominously, black standards flew alongside them, the mark of death and mourning. As he followed in the footsteps of the soldiers, Phoenix could feel his legs turning to mush. It was one thing finding the words, one thing playing the hero, but heroes have to fight. The horsehair crests that nodded on the shining helmets of the soldiers only added to the air of menace. Phoenix took in the scene and remembered Perseus's mission. How can I deliver the head of Medusa? I'm just a kid. The first guard broke in on his thoughts. There you go, boy. Take yourself inside. Well, I wouldn't like to be in your shoes. That makes two of us, thought Phoenix as the guards brought them to the entrance of the palace. What are you waiting for, Perseus? Do you know your way from here? Phoenix stared. I do? He took in the massive hostile fortress. The monstrous battlements swam before his eyes. But it wouldn't have been wise to voice his doubts. Yes, I do. He led the way inside, out of the glare of the late afternoon sun. The gloom of the marbled interior rushed to embrace them. Now where? asked Laura. Phoenix looked around. There were corridors to the left and to the right, and a broader one still that led straight ahead. For all the dread that was mounting inside him, he had to sound in control, for Laura's sake. There. They were walking under an ornate archway. The crest at the center caught his attention, the head of the Gorgon. He felt the reassuring chatter of the points bracelet as his score mounted. Yes, this is it. But how do you know? He pointed up to the Gorgon's head, then to the huge doors. It's no broom cupboard, that's for certain. Laura smiled for the first time since they had entered the game. That guard, she said. He said you'd done it this time. Done what? Phoenix shrugged. I just wish I knew myself. Time shuddered to a halt as they hesitated outside the doors. Phoenix. Her expectant look made him ache. What if I let you down? Then the inevitable guilt. Like I did, Dad. He braced himself for his entrance and pushed. It was as if he had walked on a grave. The court of King Polydectes occupied a vast hall. Its dark, cavernous depths were lit by braziers that towered over the sentinels who were standing to attention around the walls. Carved reliefs displayed the three Gorgons, the sisters of evil who dwelt at the end of the world. The die was cast. Polydectes sat on a raised platform flanked by his bodyguards. He lounged on his throne, only his eyes shifting. He had a wolf's face, lean and clean-shaven, and it was no comfort that his black hair was graying slightly. Polydectes had the look of a ruthless hunter. Age only intensified the experience. But it wasn't the king who struck fear into Phoenix's heart. In the center of the hall there was a long couch where a body lay, as if in state. It was the corpse of a youth, his own age, anointed with oil, dressed and adorned with flowers, wreaths, and bronze jewelry. The lifeless face, partly masked by its burial trappings, looked strangely familiar. For a moment Phoenix was convinced that he recognized its features. Then he dismissed the idea as quickly as it entered his head. Don't tell me this is what Perseus has been up to. A black shroud covered the corpse to the chest. Phoenix caught the eyes of Polydectes. The old wolf's gaze was flitting from the corpse to Phoenix and back again. The youth had died at the hands of Perseus, all right. The game had already dealt him a losing hand. I'm a murderer, yelled an old man who had been standing by the body. A woman, probably the boy's mother, rushed forward and raised her hand to strike Phoenix. Only the intervention of a burly guard stopped the attack. Phoenix was aware of Laura watching him, but he stared straight ahead. Pray silence for the king, bellowed a guard. Phoenix watched anxiously as Polydectes rose from his throne. Well, young Perseus, serious charges have been laid against you. Murderer! The old man roared again. Lord Polydectes, I demand justice! The cry was taken up by every member of the dead boy's family. Phoenix shrank back, wanting to protest his innocence, but unable to utter a word. Justice! Justice! It was as if the whole thing was choreographed. Parts in a play, thought Phoenix. You're all playing parts. Polydectes raised his hand. I weep for you and your loss. Weep? Polydectes? Since when do tyrants weep? Phoenix only knew about this king from the legends, but he already detested the wolf's face. And Polydectes had the false smile of a hypocrite and a cheat. Hatred flared in Phoenix's heart. For the first time he felt ready to plead his case. Hatred was strength. There you have it, Perseus. Do you see the result of that temper of yours? What began as a tavern brawl has led to the death of a young man of a good family. I have been patient with you for your poor mother's sake, but you must see what my hands are tied. A bereaved father craves justice. At last Phoenix found his voice. Hatred is strength. Lord Polydectes, he began haltingly, feeling his way, I'm sorry for a family's loss, but I plead my innocence. Innocence? Cried the dead boy's father. Half a dozen men saw you draw your sword. Half a dozen saw you strike, and the point darkened with blood. Assassin! Murderer! Clinging to what he remembered of the legend, Phoenix doggedly continued his defense. Let the son of Cronus, wide-browed Zeus, decide my fate. I throw myself on the mercy of the gods. I call on the gods of high Olympus to weigh my life on their scales. Phoenix could scarcely believe his own words. It had taken a struggle to dredge them from the depths, but once found, they tripped easily from his tongue. Polydectes joined the grieving family by the body. He snaked one arm around the shoulder of the sorrowing mother. It was a comforter's embrace, but the eyes of the tyrant showed through the flimsy pretense. As if you care. There is only one penalty for murder in my kingdom. Death! Death! Cried the mourners right on cue. Aye, said Polydectes, death it is, but my verdict must wait. We are about to bury this victim. This is a solemn and a sacred act, and I forbid any unseemly quarrelling during the rites. I will give judgment after the funeral. To the beat of a drum, the funeral procession began to file out of the hall. Laura looked at Phoenix hesitantly. He simply held out his hand. What is all this? She asked. The next episode of the game, he told her. This whole level is devoted to Perseus. That's what Pan told us. The tyrant Polydectes wants to force the mother of Perseus into marriage. Only the hero stands in the way. Something tells me this is a put-up job. Polydectes is getting me out of his hair so he can go ahead with his wedding plans. By sending you on an impossible mission. Phoenix nodded. Medusa. Laura shook her head. I keep pinching myself. I just need to wake up and I'll be home, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Forget it, Phoenix told her. There's no yellow brick road here. We're working in the dark, but this much I do know. Once the game has begun, we have got to play it to the finish. Laura stared at him. The game is insane, Phoenix. What can we do against all this? Something was stirring inside him, a strength and a knowledge given him by his love of the myths. But would it be enough? We think that's what we do. No matter how terrifying it gets, it is still a game. There must be ways to build up our power. There will be cheats too. That's the point of the game. The player has to have a chance. What will be the point of playing otherwise? Are you sure about this? No, not by a long shot. But he didn't tell Laura that. As the cortege made its way to the cliffs that overlooked the sea, the sun was beginning to set. Bats were flitting restlessly among the wind-twisted trees. Soon they were proceeding by the light of blazing torches in the hands of the guards. Wispy showers of sparks were illuminating their way. Ahead of them were the pallbearers were climbing steadily to the highest point on the cliffs. An enormous pyre had been built. Phoenix couldn't help but marvel at the intensity of his sensations. A priest was leading the lamentations, addressing the crowd. Stand and mourn at the pyre of our poor murdered son. With sacred honey, oil, and wine I anoint him. He raised a knife above the shoulders of an ox standing tethered in front of him. With the blood of this animal I honor him. The knife fell. A few moments later, the blood-stained hands of the priest were holding up the animal's heart. Phoenix smelt the wood smoke and felt the breeze on his cheeks. The illusion of reality was stronger than ever, terrifyingly strong. There was something else too. The priest had the same owl tattoo on his neck as Polydectes' guards. Phoenix had spotted it when the old man raised the sacrifice above his head. High Olympus, accept our offering. Soon the pieces of meat were being roasted on the fire. The fat spat and hissed like a nest of vipers. Phoenix blinked as the flames caught and the acrid smoke began to sting his eyes. As the fire mounted higher and the sun sank in the sky, the funeral came to an end. What now? Asked Laura. I don't know. He had been too busy trying to solve a puzzle. What sort of cremation is it? And they don't burn the body. Laura, he asked, did you actually see what happened to the dead boy? She looked at him for a moment. Then her eyes widened. You're right. They didn't put him on the funeral pyre. There's something very fishy about all this. Yes, like a corpse who isn't dead, maybe, and an owl tattoo that was being worn like the brand of a secret society. Some of the mourners also bore the mark. Before Phoenix could explore either mystery any further, a guard approached. "Follow me, Perseus. King Polydectes wants to see you in his private apartments." They were following the guard when Laura tugged at his sleeve. "Phoenix, look." The king's chancellor was dropping handfuls of coin into the mourner's eager hands. The corpse, that partly disguised but strangely familiar corpse, was the first to hold out his hand. "He's paying them off," Phoenix exclaimed. "I knew it! The whole thing was a put-up job. But how do we prove it?" "Laura," he said, "this is the tyrant's court. He has absolute power. What he says goes. We don't prove anything." The guard prodded them away with his spear. Minutes later they were being ushered into the king's presence. "Who's this?" Polydectes demanded as Laura followed Phoenix inside. My companion," he stammered. Laura managed a sarcastic comment. "I'm a slave." The king looked unhappy about her interruption. The girl didn't know her place, no equal opportunities in this world. Phoenix was the next to speak. "You wanted to see me, Lord Polydectes?" There was no shake in his voice this time. The fear was still there, but there was something else, something that might prove even stronger. A sense of belonging. "That's it. I'm home." "I like you, Perseus," he said, the oily delivery making a nonsense of his words. "I would welcome you as a son. That is, of course, if your dear mother were to agree to my proposal of marriage." There was a noise to his left. From behind a heavy curtain a woman appeared. For a second Phoenix's heart skipped. Could it be? Had she read the note and followed him into the game? But it wasn't his mother. Though she bore Mum a passing resemblance, this was Danae, mother of Perseus. Phoenix remembered his own advice. Never lose sight of one fact. This is a game. He took the woman's hands and smiled. He felt he owed her something. Danae looked back, drawn and unsmiling. Her pale eyes were troubled pools. Something passed between Phoenix and Danae. He could feel her feelings. Fear of the tyrant. Horror at the thought of being his. Polydectes cleared his throat and started to speak. "The penalty for murder, as you know, is death. I am, however, moved by your plea for mercy. I also wish to spare your poor mother any anguish." Phoenix looked into Danae's haunted eyes. He could feel her disgust for the tyrant king, her captivity. What he'd give to wipe the smile off the tyrant's face. "You have thrown yourself at the mercy of the gods," Polydectes continued. "All that remains is to strike a bargain. Name the trial you will undergo to atone for your crime, and I will accept your plea for mercy. And remember, only the greatest trial of courage can cleanse your sin." Phoenix didn't have to search his memory this time. Thanks to Pan, the legend was clear, and with it the next step in the game. "At the end of the world," Phoenix declared, "there is a cave. In this cave dwell 3 monstrous sisters, the Gorgons." Danae gasped. Her hands were gripping Phoenix's so tightly that the pressure was causing him discomfort. "The Gorgons," said Polydectes, licking his lips. "You're aiming high, young Perseus." Phoenix saw the hunger in Polydectes' eyes. It filled him with terror. But there was something else. He was alive. Every inch of him blazed with life. "I have to aim high," he thought. "There is a game to be won." "With serpents for hair," he cried, his voice ringing boldly round the chamber of Polydectes. "Teeth that can tear their prey in half, and eyes so terrible that they can turn a man to stone. The Gorgons are a match for any hero. Do you agree, Lord Polydectes?" The king's beady eyes were sparkling with delight. He could almost taste the boy's blood. "Oh, I agree. I agree." "Enjoy yourself now, Polydectes," thought Phoenix, casting a reassuring glance at Danae. "I won't forget this trumped-up charge and that living corpse. You will live to regret your deception." Let's strike a bargain then, he declared. 2 of the evil sisters are immortal and cannot be killed. I will bring you the head of the third, the horror-eyed Medusa. Done, roared Polydectes. On 2 conditions, Phoenix said, interrupting. Polydectes was almost beside himself. If one fell swoop, he would have the hand of Danae and be rid of Perseus. Name them. There will be no marriage until my return. Phoenix read the tyrant's eyes. He knew the fate of all who had challenged the Gorgon. There would be no boy to return. Agreed. What is the second condition? By delivering the head of Medusa, I will have proved my innocence. Yes, and won through to the next level of the game. You strike a hard bargain, said Polydectes, but I agree. Done. When does your mission begin? Phoenix broke away from Danae and looked Laura straight in the eye. Immediately. You depart this very night? Tonight,